Here's a question for you. Should there be an age limit on using TikTok or Instagram the way there is for driving or voting? In other countries, people are saying yes to that question, and a new survey finds that most Americans agree. So, is a social media age limit perhaps coming to the U.S., even to Maine? Our tech guy on 207, Rich Brooks from Flight New Media in Portland, has been giving this some thought and is here with us now. So let's start with this. How do Americans actually feel about this idea of an age limit for social media?
They feel mostly okay. So there was a Pew Center research project that came out this year that showed that 60% of U.S. adults are in favor of an age ban for social media, with only 20% saying no, and everybody else couldn't make up their mind. What's interesting is this is bipartisan. It didn't seem to matter whether you were conservative or liberal. There was an equal breakdown of what people thought. And if you're a parent of a teen, you're even more likely to be in favor of this ban.
This issue is picking up steam. Why is it happening now?
I think there's a few factors at play here. One is the rising concern around cyberbullying, also the addictive nature of these apps, the way that they're designed, and also the impact that social media is having on teens' mental health, which is not good. So all those concerns are relevant, as well as, like you mentioned, that the U.S. is not leading the way. In fact, some people would say we're just playing catch up.
Catching up to who?
So Australia instituted the first nationwide age ban of social media back in December. And they basically said nobody under the age of 16 can access TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat or even YouTube. And the platforms that ignore this can be sued for tens of millions of dollars. And this is interesting. So now we have this real world case we can look at. But research that's just come out showed that a lot of Australian teens are still accessing these sites. And not because they're super clever and coming up with these rounds, it's that the platforms themselves are not doing a good job of identifying and then banning these kids from the platforms. Although the research also shows that kids at least are saying they're spending less time online since the law went into effect.
All right, so that sounds like mixed results. Are there any of these bans or something along the lines of these bans already in the U.S.?
Not on the federal level. There was something called the Kids Online Safety Act, but it's been just held up in Congress for the past couple of years. So what we have now is a patchwork of state-by-state laws. Some states have actually instituted working laws right now that have an age ban. Mississippi and Tennessee are two. But a lot of states have had their laws shot down by the courts, who are basically saying this goes against people's First Amendment rights.
And how about here in Maine? Has Maine moved toward trying something like this?
They've moved, but they haven't been successful. So there was a law last year, a bill, but it died in committee. But what is interesting is this fall, the new school laws are going to be a bell-to-bell ban on smartphones. So even though we're not banning the platforms, we're banning the devices that kids are most likely to use. So I'm curious to see if we're going to see less social media use in teens, at least during the school year.
What is the argument against these age bans?
There are a few, and when I mentioned First Amendment rights, that's a big concern. The other thing is, to make these laws work, you need to have some verification system, which means uploading identification, facial scans, and not everybody is okay, especially for teens, to be able to do that sort of thing. There's also a real concern around the fact that these social media sites can become online communities for marginalized kids, for kids in the LGBTQ communities and rural kids. And let's face it, here in Maine, there's a lot of rural areas that this impacts the kids. So you're kind of losing all that when you have these bans. And the other thing is, unenforceable laws are never a good idea. So unless you can enforce this, why bother creating these laws in the first place?
So with no government bans here, the responsibility falls on parents. What do you suggest parents do?
I think that parents have more control and more influence than they realize. First of all of these platforms and your phones have parental tools built into them, so you can use the tools themselves to limit your kids' access. I also know parents who do things like at 9 o'clock, all the phones go into the kitchen, get plugged in, and nobody touches them overnight. They don't go into the bedrooms. And then just having open conversations with your kids about what they're seeing online, what social media sites they're visiting, and just having those open discussions can go a long way towards mitigating some of the negative impact of social media.
All right, you've looked at this from a lot of different angles. Any final thoughts?
I'm conflicted, honestly. There is a lot of evidence that shows that social media has a negative influence on teens, and we have to respect that. At the same time, there's a lot of bad content, it's true, but there's a lot of good content on these platforms. DIY content, educational content, and just a global ban doesn't seem like the right solution to me. Now, my kids have aged out, so I don't need to worry about it. But if my kids were 16 or under, I would be more thinking about what are the tools and platforms that are in place that I can use right now and having open conversations. And I'd rather be in charge of determining when my kids are ready for social media or not, rather than a nationwide ban.
Yeah. A lot of good, thought-provoking ideas. Rich Brooks from Flight New Media, thank you as always. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.